And I'm going to start by asking Diana about her family background and education. I know she doesn't want to spend ages on it, but I think we'd all like to hear just a bit. So over to you, Diana.
Well, I was born in London. I was born in the Middlesex Hospital, sadly closed now, towards the end of the war. I'm going to be honest about my age. I was born in 1944. My mother was born in England. Her father was born in England. I think her mother came over at the age of 2. They're very English on my mother's side. My father was born in Belgium, and my parents fell in love. It was a holiday romance, actually, on Ostend Beach, and in 1933, and they married in 1936, and they went to live in Belgium. They went to live in Antwerp, but in 1940, Belgium was invaded, and somebody banged on the door and said, "You must leave." And so they piled everything into the car, and they left. And they went to the seaside, to Knock in the south. And then as Belgian army wasn't doing very well, they then moved to France. And they moved further and further south in France because the French weren't doing very well either, and neither were the British. In fact, my mother, I remember, always told me that when she was in France, she sort of, a Lancashire lad, sort of rather freckled and young, said, "Oh, Jerry's been all round here and bombed all round here." It didn't seem to be going very well at all. So they went to Bordeaux, and which was about as far as you could go. They couldn't get anywhere any further than that. And France asked for an armistice. They were there 6 weeks. And my mother noticed that there was a ship leaving from the port, by which time my father had given up his car to the Free French, and there was no petrol. And a very kind former soldier, French former soldier, drove them to the harbour, and they were actually able to get on the ship. My mother still, of course, had a British, we had an expired.
It's not doing it for me.
Can you hear me? It's okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and anyway, so the rest is history. They arrived in England, they survived the war, and I was born toward the end.
Usually the top one. It's usually.
And so I grew up in London. We lived in St John's Wood. My father was a diamond merchant. Later on, had a reserved occupation during the war, making specialist tools, cutting diamonds. But after that, he went back to what he'd been doing before, and he wanted to go to South Africa, where they dig diamonds out of the earth, as you know, in Kimberley. And we went to live in Johannesburg for a while, and we moved about quite a lot. It was I had a very interesting and agreeable childhood, but it was also very disrupted in terms of schooling. And when I was 11, we went back to South Africa, and I was there for 4 years at school. Actually, I'm going to sound very posh, but I was at Rodin in Johannesburg, because there used to be 3 branches of Rodin, one in Johannesburg, one in Canada, which was called Edge Hill, it no longer exists, I gather, and the one in Brighton. And we used to describe ourselves as Rodin, and there was Rodin Brighton. Rodin Brighton. So anyway, I didn't go to Rodin Brighton. When I came back, I went to Queen's College, and I did my O-levels there, and then I decided I would do a secretarial course. School was absolutely furious because I was quite academic. But I don't know, my parents weren't keen on my going to university, and there's a certain amount about that in Lovers and Brothers, it does reflect a certain degree of what my father was like. They're not as bad as many, obviously, but there's something of it. And I was not encouraged to go to university. They were very worried about what would happen if I went there and got too many ideas. So I didn't. And so I went to work. I did an extra couple of O-levels. I had quite a lot of them by the end. And I went to work at a publishing house. I went to work for Heinemann's in the editorial department. I had a very junior job. And it was fascinating. And I think that's probably what sort of sparked I always liked writing. I wrote a stupid play when I was 10 years old, so I always wanted to write. And then I left Heinemann's and I decided I wanted to study. I felt that I was going to have a dead-end job if I didn't. It would limit what I could do. And so I was doing my A-levels, and then I didn't finish them. And then I met Malcolm. I was 19. We got married when I was 20, and after I was married and we walked into the sunset, I decided I really needed these A-levels. So I did the A-levels as I was having my children. Well, no, as I was having one or two of them. And then I did my law exams when I was having my third. And I qualified in May 1970. Well, I took the final exams in May 1972. And I see that one of the lady who went through all the exams with me, those final exams, was here. And it's Joyce. Joyce and I suffered that last year together. We sat next to each other in the class. It was great fun. We were the married ladies. And you know, but it was very hard work. They were real grind, 7 papers, and with some remarkable subjects missing. We didn't do divorce, for example. We didn't do matrimonial. Do you remember, Joyce? We had to, if you wanted to practice, you absolutely had to do revenue law, which I had no intention of practicing in the revenue field, whatever, but you had to do a whole paper on revenue law, 3 hours of it. And then we didn't do landlord and tenant. We did land law, but we didn't do landlord and tenant. We didn't do conveyancing. We didn't do quite a lot of, if you know what I mean. We did the English legal system, and we did administrative law, which is now very, very big. But at the time when we did it, it was very, very dull, and nothing much ever happened in it. It was the most boring subject on the planet. If you couldn't sleep, you actually picked up this awful textbook and you read it, and then you fell asleep. So anyhow, that was the story of my exams. I passed everything. It was wonderful. And then there I was. I had 3 little children. I had no help, not enough money to employ anybody, and it was all extremely difficult. And so one way and another, I did one disastrous term of trying to teach at Barnet College of Further Education. And then I thought, oh God, what am I going to do? And then I did have proper pupilages. I was very, very lucky. But I had to do chancery pupilages. And for non-lawyers, the reason I chose this, which was not what I really wanted to do, was for 2 reasons. Chancery bar is very static. You don't run about a great deal. There's not a lot of court work, there's a lot of paperwork. It doesn't appeal to everybody. It's regarded as the creme de la creme. It's a sort of highbrow bit of the bar, if you like. Anyway, I had to do that because I couldn't be running around.
My second annual members meeting, and this is why I'm so proud in particular. The Royal Free London has a fantastic history.
Can you mute whoever that is?
Sorry, who was that? Okay, can we go back to Diana? I don't know who that was speaking.
Diana's now muted.
Diana, you're muted. Neng, Diana's muted. So
I can't unmute myself.
oh, good. Okay.
Really?
Yes. Now.
I have taken it off. I have succeeded without you. I've unmuted.
We can hear. I can hear you loud and clear. So carry on.
They can all hear me, dear. He doesn't think I can manage without him, and mostly I can't. It's true. But anyway. Yeah, anyway, so there we are. So
Right.
so let's move on, really.
Okay. So when I know that you became the medico-legal, correspondent for the Lancet, that's something I think you enjoyed a lot, didn't you?
I did. Well, what happened was this: because I had these little children after I'd done my grand pupillage, I really had to do something that had very limited hours. And didn't take me out of London, but I knew when I'd be back for the children. So, and also that had long holidays. So I took up a bit of law reporting,
Mm.
and when I found an interesting case, I wrote about them, and I did a lot of writing, and eventually I wrote a lot for the Lancet. I wrote for I became really their correspondent, and when they had something, they used to contact me or I would contact them, and we were in touch all the time. And they were very different days. They were in those days quite independent. They're nothing like they are now. And I got to know the editor and the deputy editors very, very well. We used to see them sort of once a month, twice a month, had lunch with them. It was a very nice, it was a very enjoyable, but the thing about writing for the Lancet, it's so international, you become known all over the world. It's absolutely astonishing. And then of course, the spin-off was I was asked to go and speak at a lot of conferences and things like that. And so we traveled on the Lancet as well. I was offered a first-class ticket, I never took it. We used to take two economies, and sometimes I'd get Malcolm a speaking part too, because in the other parts of the world, they don't have barristers and solicitors. So we used to go as a sort of double act and explain, you know, the split profession and that kind of thing.
So it sounds like you had a very enjoyable association with the Lancet.
I did, but after about 10 years, beginning of 1991, I moved out of my chancery, finally moved out of my chancery. And I went, because Malcolm said, for goodness sake, children have grown up now, you should be doing something more than that. And I got myself a very good set of chambers where I stayed until I retired. We were a common law set, which were much more suitable, and I had much more work. And indeed, I was in a very big case, which helped our finances significantly. And
that's good.
And it was actually against a drug company, a pharmaceutical company. But Deadfin, I will come back to, Deadfin was partly to do with that, but it was actually really before that, because I used to travel, I traveled around at these conferences. A lot of them were funded by pharmaceutical companies. They had the money and they regarded me as a friend. And when I was instructed in this action against them, they regarded me as their enemy. So I was then immediately blacklisted, and they all obviously talked to each other, because it didn't take 2 minutes before I was never invited to another conference again.
So you went from hero to zero rather quickly.
Well, you know, from their point of view, I was doing okay. From my point of view, I was very happy with it. I just thought they were rather childish, you know, but from their point of view, I was poacher turned gamekeeper, I think, you know, or whatever. I had changed from that. They didn't want me there anymore. They regarded me as basically hostile. So that's that. So now
I have been lucky enough to read. Well, I haven't read all your books. I haven't read the first one, but I've read, as you know, I've read your first one. I believe was The God Lovers.
Well, it's a question. It's called a question whether you count the casebook on rent review and lease renewal. My first book was a long time ago. I was the co-author of casebook on rent review and lease renewal before I gave up property law. And that was not a good idea. And then I wrote a novel in about 1983 called The God Lovers. And this was a result of Malcolm had at the time quite a lot of very orthodox clients, sort of people I'd never had much to do with. Well, I'd never had anything to do with.
You're talking about Orthodox Jewish, I assume.
Orthodox Jewish clients, yes. The sort of people, I mean, they were nothing, I was totally unfamiliar with their world, really. And we were, because I was married to Malcolm and they thought highly of him, we were invited to various events. We were invited to weddings, the sort of weddings I'd never been to. And so it was as a result of one of these weddings that, and having sort of seen into their world, if you like, I became interested in it. And and that's how I came to write the original book, The God Lovers. I didn't like it, but I became interested in it. And
would you like to, I know you're going to, which is lovely, you're going to read some excerpts from your books.
Well, I'm not going to read from The God Lovers.
Not from The God Lovers, no, okay. But it must have been very interesting to be an observer into a new sort of a new world, as you're describing it.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's certainly a very, very long way away from the Chancery Division. It's a very long way away from the Lancet. It was a long way from traveling around, flying around the world. But that was only just starting when I read that. I'd only just started writing for the Lancet when I read the original God Lovers. And it's a long time ago, and I know everybody will say that they're just the same person inside themselves, as just they look older, but actually we're not. Because see, I'll tell you how it happened. If it had not been for COVID, The God Lovers would have been the last book I'd have ever written.
Really?
Yes, but because of COVID, we were rather turned in on ourselves and restricted in what we could do. And so I don't know why, but because I hadn't thought about the God Lovers for years. It's on a very high shelf that I never take down. I had to get on a ladder to get to it. And suddenly I just thought, gosh, what a waste. I'd invented this whole family and I did nothing sensible with them, and gosh, supposing I were to write that again, that would be interesting. So I got this book down and we scanned it, we pulled it to pieces and we scanned it. And then I thought, oh no, I can't keep that. I'm going to have to rewrite it. Oh, I think the ending's awful. Oh no, I shouldn't have left it like that. And so before you could say Jack Robinson, I spent 6 months rewriting the blinking thing, but it was the family I had invented, remained, but my outlook had slightly changed. And I was less black and white than I was when I was younger. I didn't want this hugely black and white. I was more mellowed, I was more nuanced. And also I thought I really had wasted the ending. I mean, the publisher always told me, he said to me, where's the ending? I said, you've got an ending. He said, no, there's no ending. I keep looking on the pages, where is it going? And you haven't got an ending. And I thought, well, he might have been right, actually. He's dead now, but he might have been right. So,
it does seem to me as if you've always wanted and had a strong working life alongside being a family person.
Well, yes, I like to think that I always put my children first. Hence, I put my career on hold for such a long time. Just doing the writing was a career on hold move for me. When I managed to keep them sort of going to a lesser, even though I was practicing, and the writing has then come back when I retired. But I couldn't work really full time until Gareth was about 17 or 18. He's now, a mature chap, doing well. So
have any of your children followed in your literary footsteps?
Well, Catherine, my daughter, written a book.
Oh, right.
And I'm sure the others could if they had the time, but they really are too busy trying to earn a living, I mean, I had a husband, so I was very lucky. He was working away, so I wasn't making a great deal out of my writing. We had an interesting time, But anyway, so now what can I tell you? So I will say this, that I did always want to do medico-legal work. And the door was absolutely slammed in my face and all women's faces when I qualified. I was doing my pupillage, I can remember, in 1974-5, something like that. I had a year out after qualifying, so it was 73, 75. And before that, I think I was, I don't know how, but I think Malcolm's firm arranged, because they knew I was interested, they arranged for me to sit in on a conference. And although it must be nearly 50 years ago, I have never forgotten this conference. It made a very great impression on me, and not really for the right reasons. And I'll tell you about it.
Good.
I told this story at my leaving party at my chambers, and they all said, oh, and I told them the story. And this is what it was. I went along I was allowed to sit in on a medico-legal conference. These were pretty rare in those days. People didn't sue their doctors nearly as much. It was very difficult to get a doctor to rat on another doctor as they saw it, and it was really quite difficult. At any rate, this was a chap who he was a hairdresser. I don't know how he had the money. I don't think he had, we may have had legal aid. I don't know what his circumstances were. And he was complaining. I just sitting there, I couldn't say anything. Obviously, I was just there to keep quiet. And he came and he said his problem was he'd had this hip operation and his legs were uneven and his leg ached and he couldn't really do his job because he couldn't stand up. He couldn't stay standing for any length of time, and it was really awful. And he thought that it hadn't been well done. Now, before as they came in, counsel said, who was kind of rather patrician type, very public school, and he said, no, I'm so sorry, but I should have said something about this earlier, but you should know that I play golf with Mr. Watson, who was the operating surgeon. And if that is a matter of concern for you, and we can stop now. I mean, to actually say it when the man was in the room is outrageous. Anyway, my mouth, what did I know? I was a student. My mouth opened and shut, and I said nothing, but I thought it was awful. And I waited for the solicitor, who was somebody Malcolm knew very well, but young, and he said nothing. And this poor little man who was, he said, no, it's all right. He said, well, then, of course, he proceeded to say he had no case at all. Now, whether he did or didn't have a case, I can't tell you, but it struck me as very shocking. And when I related this, my colleagues, when I was leaving, thought this was quite terrible. And the other thing that he thought was quite terrible was when I went to see the clerk, the clerk was the person who managed chambers. I said, this is the subject I'm really interested in, this medicine and law. And he said, oh, don't you start getting any ideas. We've never had any women here. We've never had any women in these chambers, and we're not starting now.
Gosh.
Yes, that is how it was. Really was. And I don't exaggerate. And when I was studying, somebody said, oh, you must meet Mr. So-and-so QC. So I met Mr. So-and-so QC, and I said, very proud of myself, well, I'm going to be a barrister. I'm studying for the bar. And he said, oh, well, you'll be going down to the Temple. I said, why? He said, because that's what women do. Women go down to the Temple and they do divorce and crime. I said, but supposing I don't want to do divorce and crime. He said, no, that's what women do. Women go down to the Temple and they do divorce and crime. Well, actually, as I didn't ever do matrimonial law, this wouldn't have been a very good choice. But anyhow, so I said, no, well, I didn't want to do divorce and crime, and I never did do divorce and crime. And I went to the Chancery Division instead. And when I went there, they didn't really know what to do with me, because they really weren't really used to women there either. So there was only one loo, which the secretary used, and it was all rather embarrassing. And I felt like I popped out of a cake in a gentleman's club, frankly. And I was married with children. I mean, I think if you were a young single person, I was a little bit older.
Battery high, phone 1 connected.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Ignore it. Yeah.
So
did you ever find out what happened to the hairdresser who couldn't stand up anymore?
Well, I'm afraid he probably had to find something else to do.
Oh, how terrible.
Well, there you are. I mean, that's where it was. So now, okay, so that's how I got into it, and so I've been editing the Medico-Legal Journal since, I think it's going to be 40 years in 2023, which is a staggering amount of time. And I took it over. It was a tiny, miserable little thing. I was embarrassed. So very soon I expanded it. And then it's become international now, but I'll show you what it looks like. Just if I hold it up. That's what it looks like. It is the Journal of the Medico-Legal Society. And it was really a journal of record. It just was originally intended, it's been going since 1931. It was intended to just record the events in the society, and the talks given to the society, particularly for those members that couldn't get there to hear them. But I expanded it hugely, and now we are, with the help of email. Email has changed everything. We have become completely international now, and so it's just as easy to receive stuff from India, from Africa, from America, from Ukraine, from Timbuktu. You name it, we get it, and it's so fascinating. And what really hugely increased this, it really accelerated it, was COVID. That's a special edition we did for COVID.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I wrote, it was actually Harry Zeitlin's suggestion. He said, well, we should do something about COVID. And I said, yes, you're right. And I wrote to all our regular contributors and I said, tell us what's happening in your country. And as they started telling us what was happening in their country, and we told everybody what was happening in our country, more and more people started writing into us. And we had, and the publishers, we're not an open access journal because we're a subscription journal. And so, but the publisher decided that COVID was so important they should take the restrictions off. And so it became open access for all COVID material. And so as a result, you can imagine that from having 20,000 downloads in 2017, we've had 120,000.
Oh gosh.
So it's been quite an extraordinary journey. And I'm very delighted to be still steering the ship, as it were.
Well, they must be so delighted that you are steering the ship. So
well, they obviously going to have to look for a successor because, as I say, I'm a person with a career behind me.
yeah.
I've got a very good, much younger medical editor now, and I know there are people who would like to come in, and I will be bringing them in. Because you can't leave it. It's very important to have succession. But on the other hand, I admit I'm not keen to give it up. So I think I'm going to keep holding the tiller for a bit longer.
Good. Well, I'm pleased to hear it, and I'm sure they are.
Well, for now, yes.
Can we now have the treat of hearing you read some excerpts? And if you tell us which book, I think I'll recognise the first one if it's Lovers and Brothers. So
I was going to actually disappoint.
I'll first with that.
I was going to give you an idea of what I do the rest of the time. I was going to tell you a little bit about refugee doctors.
Oh yes, please do. Please do.
Just a paragraph.
Yes.
According to the BMA's latest figures, it is estimated there are about 2,000 refugee doctors currently in the UK. As of May 2022, most of their qualifications will not allow them to gain registration with the GMC without further exams and training. As never before, however, the COVID pandemic has prompted urgent consideration on how to encourage these doctors to make themselves useful within the NHS to fill the gaps left by long-standing staff shortages and illness due directly or indirectly to COVID. Indeed, in December 2020, medical directors in different areas of the UK were contacted by NHS England to encourage the short-term recruitment of up to 1,000 doctors as MSWs, medical support workers, and funding for this was provided. Well, that medical support workers, they're not being, in fact, invited to work as proper qualified doctors, but to sort of be helpers, if you like. But it's something for them better than that, and it puts them on a pathway, if you like.
Absolutely.
The same with nurses. But the worst of the problem is that a lot of these refugee doctors come from countries that really need them, but they're often, their lives are at risk if they go back. I'm not talking about Ukraine, where they mostly have probably stayed, but places where, like Syria and Iran and anywhere where they have Russia, anywhere where they feel unsafe, they return. If they've expressed views which are contrary to the government takes a dim view of it, and their lives are then at risk. So they can't.
Are their qualifications accepted in the UK? I mean, that's not an issue, or is it?
No, they have to take an English exam, and I think there are some countries where the qualifications are accepted, but unlikely to be any of those. So they have to sit further exams. So it's not straightforward. That's why they can act as medical support workers.
Right.
Anyway, there you are. That's what I do for the day job, as it were.
Right. And how often do you do that? Do you work full time at it? or-
No. I mean, there are days when I don't do anything, and there are days when I do quite a lot. I would say on average, I might spend a day and a half a week on it, something like that. It seems to take more time than it used to, because we have so much material. Even if you have to read it and reject it, we get a huge amount in. It's all published online first.
Mm.
We have so much stuff that's worth having, but we can't ever put all of it in a paper journal, even if we have an extra issue, and which we're quarterly, and we've had an extra one in 2020 because of COVID, and we're having a fatter one at Christmas this year. But I've still got enough for like 2 journals online that will never get into the paper journal. We have to be quite selective. So it's all there. Okay.
Now,
Yes.
Diana Brahams, author.
Oh, well. Okay, well, I thought I would just read a little bit from the very beginning. Where we have
And this is Lovers and Brothers, is it?
I will hold it up. This is a book called Lovers and Brothers. As I say, it stems from the God Lovers in a rather, this family come from the God Lovers, but what happens to them is in many ways rather different. So having invented them, I decided to give them a different life. So Jacob is, if you like, the main character.
Hmm.
And he's a man, he's 26, he's religious without being fanatical, he's an accountant, and he's very good at maths, and he got a first in maths, as we find out at other times in the book. And he's nice looking, he's rather shy, and he plays a lot of chess, and he doesn't have a fantastic social life. But he also suffers from very bad headaches. So we have him here. A few minutes later, he walked out unsteadily into the cold, bright February morning. He had to keep his head bent to avoid the low rays of sun in his eyes, and his progress was slow as he turned into Chancery Lane, where the solid red brick buildings on his left blocked out the sun. They also offered welcome support for him to lean on while he searched a second time, fruitlessly, through his pockets. His pills were not there. He could visualize the bottle on his night table. A wave of dizziness caused Jacob to halt outside the parade of small shops halfway down. They were all still closed at this early hour. He stood still, but the pavement kept moving beneath him. It rose and then fell back. In the hope of steadying himself, like a ship at anchor, Jacob seized hold of a piece of protruding masonry and cautiously moved his head to look around him. Sudden movements were to be avoided. He was standing beside a brightly lit window display of toiletries. Higher up, arranged on a stout shelf, were 3 antique glass flagons filled with red, blue, and green liquids. He was outside the local chemist. His heart rising a little with hope, Jacob shuffled forward to read the opening times. He was leaning against the door where they were displayed when it swung suddenly open, launching him into the shop. Dropping his briefcase with a thud, Jacob lurched towards the counter, dislodging some boxes of cough sweets as he grabbed wildly at it and the room spun crazily around him. From somewhere at the back, a young woman in a white coat came running. She looked upset and was shouting, "No, we're closed. We don't open till 9. You can't come in." Clinging onto the counter, blinked painfully and apologetically and mumbled, "Sorry, it just flew open. I don't feel well. Please help me. I think I'm going to faint. Hold on, I'll get you a chair." She hurried back with one and then guided Jacob to sit on it. "Hold the seat with both hands." He felt her firm hand on his shoulder. "Put your head down a bit." He moaned and drifted in and out of consciousness, but then gradually he began to surface again. "Do you think you have a fever?" She stretched out a hand to feel his forehead. Instinctively, Jacob brushed it away and their fingers touched in the air. No, Jacob tried to gather his thoughts. No, I suffer with migraines. This is a bad one. My head feels like it's in a vice. Someone is poking red hot needles in it. Plus, I feel sick, and a bit giddy still. He groaned. The pain was so overwhelming, he struggled to articulate the words. They came out as a mumble. There you are. Anyway, that's how he meets Nancy. Nancy, who he falls madly in love with. He would never have met her but for his migraines. So
I must tell everyone who's listening, because I've quite experienced at reading this book, because I've reviewed it for three different outlets, shall we say. And I was so engrossed in the family, I actually missed them when I finished the book. I felt as if I knew them, and they had, I was looking around me, and it's absolutely engrossing. And also in my opinion, your capacity for dialogue is exceptional. So I think it's a really great book. And what I wanted to ask you is, how disciplined are you with writing? Have you got a day that is writing day, or how does it work?
no, oh, I should have said this book is set in 1972. No, I wish I could be like Graham Greene, who apparently wrote for 3 hours every day, and he stopped mid-sentence when it got to 12 o'clock, 9 to 12, you know, that was it, he stopped. I'm not like that. I wish I could be, but I'm absolutely not like that. First, and also, I'm not, because he was a professional writer, if you like, I'm not a professional writer in the sense that, you know, he was doing it for a living and he stuck, and I'm sure somebody like Simonal, who turned out stuff, I mean, obviously a very different quality, but he was nonetheless a very successful writer, and he wrote very quickly, and I dare say he said himself times when he did. It's different. You see, first of all, I'm a woman, and Malcolm can't cook, and he doesn't cook.
Oh, poor Malcolm, he sat here, such a good boy, and now his mention, he's gone bright red, I must tell you.
Well, the thing is, the household, I mean, I run it. I mean, we are a team, we do different things. I mean, he does all the things, I mean, it's wonderful. He does things like, if the cat brings in a dead mouse, he moves it. You know.
Oh, well, that's worth a lot of meals, yeah.
And then, you know, if there's a fuse or something, he sees to it.
Okay,
If
all
I
right.
can't work the computer, he comes and deals with it.
Okay.
So I put them in, but he doesn't really know how to work the washing machine, and he has difficulty finding the dishwasher.
He seems to have very convenient blind spots in his skill set, actually.
But, you know, there you are.
Yeah, he liked that comment. He's giving me the thumbs up.
So, you know, so look, so there are things that have to be done, and do have to get done, and there's also the Medico-Legal Journal has to be, and there's all the children and the grandchildren and one thing. So I write when I've got time, and I write, and I don't need to feel inspired, if you like. I mean, you're right. I mean, obviously couldn't if I didn't feel I wanted to, but it isn't that I'm not like a poet who sits under a tree waiting for inspiration. It isn't like that.
Do you write in longhand and then type it up, or do you write straight onto the computer and then edit it from there?
No, I write straight onto the computer. I'm a touch typist.
Okay.
I've always typed everything. I mean, The Godlovers was typed on, and Casebook on Rent Review were typed on a typewriter.
Okay.
This is, doing it on a computer is easier because you can edit so much better. I mean, cut and paste is what I used to do, which really was cut and paste. You know, you wouldn't want to type the whole page again, so you cut bits and pieces and stuck them on. You know, literally. So it was a huge advantage. That, and I mean, the thing is, you've got to sort of feel you know your characters, I suppose.
Yes.
You think to yourself, well, what would I do in that situation if I was that person? And sometimes I probably failed because I'm not a man, I'm not an old man, I'm not a sick old man, I'm not a young Orthodox man. I try from what I've seen of them and from experience. I mean, and the other thing is, in the original God Lovers, there's very little medicine, very little, because I'd only really just started doing it. In the second, in this Mothers and Brothers, there's a lot of medical scenes, if you think about it. Various members of the family have, as people do, have things happening. Jacob's father has got a grumbling heart condition that he knows perfectly well he's got, but he keeps ignoring it. And Jacob's brother, Reuben's wife, is having a baby, and the baby is lying breech. These are all situations I came across in my practice, and I just helped myself to things out of my memory and people I met, and none of these people are people I met. They're all bits and pieces of people I met, and bits and pieces of me, I suppose, as well. One of the things I really felt I'd let myself down on with the original God Lovers was that I felt that I'd shortchanged all the women. They were so boring. And they had so little to say, and they were such ciphers. They just did as they were told, and maybe they do, but this wasn't right. And I thought to myself, my God, Nancy's pathetic. Come on. So I put myself in Nancy's situation, and she was much more stroppy, and you know, and she was much more of a challenge for Jacob, as she should have been, and his even poor downtrodden Leah, Reuben's wife, he's a bit of a bully. Even she has a bit of a go, and you know, and as for poor mother, you know, with her 6 children, and her overbearing husband, and Rebecca, I gave her a let out, a nicer let out than I did originally, and I'd originally called Rebecca's rather unattractive sister Malka, and Catherine, my daughter, said, how can you give her a name like that? So I just said, right, we'll change her to Hannah, and she won't be as plain, you know. So I was I was a bit kinder to all the ladies, you know, and so they all have voices, and they've got a lot to say, and they you know, and I felt very much for them, that they jolly well should. And of course, Nancy has a lot of fire and a lot of character. And even poor Nancy's stepmother has something to say, and she
That's true. Yeah.
She has more than a walk-on partner. So I really transformed, and I thought, no, the women have really got to have something to say here. Can't just be dominated by all these.
Can I ask you, we've got about a quarter of an hour left. Are you happy for me to invite people to ask you questions, or would you particularly like to read another excerpt of your latest book? What's your preference?
Well, can I just, I'm going to read you one paragraph from the new book.
Okay.
And then you can ask away, okay? Well, I think I probably said too much already, but there you are. Okay, this book is called Dead Thin. And it's very, very different from the other one, very different. And I'm just going to read the very first, the prologue.
Okay.
Not even the whole prologue, it's quite short. It was dark and raining heavily, and oh, by the way, it takes place on the 31st of March, 2001. It was dark and raining heavily when David drove out of the floodlit but deserted Flatacres car park. He'd not been sleeping well for weeks, yet somehow he'd been able to continue working quite efficiently, if you made allowances for the occasional catnaps at his desk. He'd forgotten to lock his office door yesterday and guessed that Rice had seen him slumped over his files before slipping quietly out. The last thing he needed was Rice poking around in his affairs. He really needed to get away. If the patient trials of Reductopan were not due to start in 4 weeks, he would already have been applying for jobs abroad. He could let out the house or sell it, depending on how things worked out. He fancied a move to the States. In the full beam of his headlights, the rain looked like a wild waterfall as it tumbled over the windscreen. Fortunately, the hard top of the convertible was securely attached. The aging canvas leaked in several places and was best kept for dry weather. Through the frantic motion of the wipers, he negotiated the private narrow road to halt at the barrier where the guard was seated in his cabin, surrounded by CCTV monitors. Waving to David, he opened the electric gate and raised the heavy bar to let him out. Now, eager to get home, David rapidly circled the war memorial and was passing the sodden village green when an image of Laura came into his mind so clearly that it felt as if she were really with him inside the car. He glanced sideways, but the passenger seat was quite empty, of course. An illusion, but still troubling. She was dressed as she had been the morning when she reached her target weight. She was wearing one of his striped office shirts over black lacy underwear. She was reaching out a ghostly hand to his knee when he heard yet again his former mentor's reproving voice. David, what have you done here? You are not a sculptor modeling a lump of clay. You are having a sexual relationship with this young woman, a woman who was your patient, is your patient. You must end it at once. Easy to say, not so easy to do. Too late now, far too late. As the car leapt forward, skidding around the sharp bends, David took a hand from the steering wheel to rub his aching eyes, glad that the rain had reduced to a fine drizzle. It was then that he realized the brick wall that should have been on the left side of the road was racing straight towards him. That's
Oh, gosh, that sounds another page turner.
I hope so. I hope so.
Can I now, as I say, we've got just under quarter an hour left. Is there anybody who'd like to ask Diana something? Can I throw it open? And if you do, you have to unmute yourself. Well,
Valerie's asking, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Valerie.
Yeah.
Have you unmuted, Valerie?
Yes.
Good.
Having been nearly 20 years ahead of you at the bar, when things were even worse for women, didn't you find it a terrible disadvantage not getting a law degree first? Because I used to feel very sorry for people who took the bar exams and hadn't done a law degree. Did you feel sort of ungrounded?
No.
Oh, well, that's interesting. But you see, we had covered subjects that you hadn't done just in the bar exams.
Well, remember, I was quite specialized very early on.
Yes.
So I was, let's see, well, I was in the Chancery Bar. It might have been nice to have done a law degree, but actually I was quite, one of the reasons I went into the Chancery Bar, or I was able to go into the Chancery Bar, if you like, was because I showed a certain amount of, how shall I put this, ability for those subjects. They weren't necessarily what I wanted to do, but I was actually quite reasonable at them, if you like, and so I didn't find it. Yes, it was a pity in a way, but no. I mean, I just got on with it, Valerie. I mean, I'm a very pragmatic person. I just do what I feel has to be done, and I just do it. I mean, you know, I had so many things thrown at me. There was so much going against me. So it's one more thing, and I just brushed it aside, I'm afraid.
The other thing I'd like to ask you, I did quite a lot of medical negligence cases, and hospital notes had a habit of disappearing, and witnesses would have a habit of disappearing if you were unlucky as well. And you can imagine what it was like to get witnesses who are happy to give evidence against the doctors, because the hospital had all the resources, and they would call 6 witnesses for everyone that you could find. And did you come across a lot of these cases where you're really banging your head against a brick wall for a plaintiff against a hospital doctor?
I think things have probably moved on a bit. There was a degree of reluctance. I was very disappointed with the number of expert witnesses who were supposed to be giving advice for my client, and I felt were totally opposed to the whole idea of it. And we soon found out who not to ask, and sometimes you had to get a second opinion. They just wasted the money. And see, by this time there was much more knowledge about who not to ask. But I saw some quite dishonest professional witnesses, certainly during my time, a lot of it. And to give you an idea, I had to, at the last minute, I didn't do many inquests. And one of the reasons I didn't do many inquests was, first of all, there weren't that many going that were medical negligence, because you couldn't get legal aid for them at the time. And then after that, people didn't want to fund them. So people had to pay for them themselves, or you had to do it pro bono. And 3 days before the inquest, I was instructed to go and act for a woman, or rather the husband, the surviving husband of a woman who died during childbirth, and she died whilst giving birth to triplets. Well, I say she died actually within a week of giving birth to triplets. She didn't die on the operating table. And this was not that long before Janine was expecting her triplets. So I never told her about this case, which was a very distressing case. And at the inquest, I think something like 6 or 7 doctors came to give evidence on, for the hospital. But of course, it's not they were not expert witnesses; they were witnesses to fact, so called. And I had no witnesses at all, because I mean, we weren't, it was really, I had no expert witnesses to help me. What I did have, I had 2 friends who I phoned up before, and during the inquest lasted more than a day, it went over to the next day. I had 2 friends who advised me when I told them what was going on. One was a very well-known pathologist, and the other one, a forensic pathologist, and the other one was an obstetrician. And I asked, and they gave me some advice on what I should ask. And even so, there I was on my own with my solicitor, with all these medical experts, and the coroner. And I found giving inquests, I didn't like them, because they have their own rules of evidence, and you're not allowed to sum up to them and say, but how can such and such be such and such? No, you can't say that. I've already said it, of course, by lunchtime. And in truth, I was a bit uneasy about how to go forward. And counsel for the other side, who'd obviously probably done more inquests than me, I suspect he had, but he knew he was on a bit of a sticky wicket. But he was an idiot, because he asked one question too many. And
Fatal.
It's fatal. And I mean, they were going to be stuffed anyway, of course, but it was useful to do it at the inquest because there were a lot of press there. So it was an interesting case. We had newspapers were interested in it. And so I thought, I did it, about myself, never, there's a rule that all barristers know, and solicitors who do advocacy, you never ask a question to which you do not already think you know the answer, because it can be, because you can really come very unstuck if you do it, which makes you a little bit cautious about what questions you're going to ask. Well, I did not know the answer, so I was a bit worried about asking the question of, he misread basically what it was that the various doctors had failed to notice obvious signs of this woman deteriorating, and he didn't know how to read the X-ray, probably read it the wrong way around, and he was very, very arrogant, this young man who came. And I thought, I debated whether I should ask him this, and then I didn't. And then I regretted it. And then very fortunately, his own counsel asked him the question I hadn't asked, which was, and then of course, he'd opened it up for me, I could ask it. But it is a very tricky business, litigation, and inquests can be, oh gosh, there's some of them pretty difficult, but yes. And yes, I've felt things that were against me. I had another inquest where I was acting for a dead woman. Again, I never saw the family of a dead woman who never came to court and just sent their solicitor, who never did this sort of thing. He was just the family solicitor. So there were the 2 of us. And what had happened was she was in a car traveling along a wet road. An ambulance hit her full on because it was on a call out, and she was killed. And the problem was that she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and they knew this because she had dogs and they chewed all the seatbelts through, and she'd suffered whiplash, very severe whiplash. And they were trying to say that they weren't speeding, and anyway, it was her own fault for not wearing a seatbelt. But my friendly forensic pathologist told me that yes, you can, even with a seatbelt on, you can get a fatal whiplash. And I used that in Dead Thin, as a matter of fact, took it straight out of that inquest and put it in Dead Thin. So there you are.
Diana, regretfully, we're out of time. I think, well, I could certainly listen to you for another hour, but that would wear you out. But we've had such wonderful insights into your careers. I have to say careers, because there's been a few of them. And, it's been really, really fascinating. So I can't wait to read my copy of Dead Thin. Thank you. And thank you for being so generous with your time and, telling us about things. And lots of good luck with many more books, which I hope you will produce and publish. But thank you very much for being my guest tonight, because it's been